Today's ceremony is particularly special because for the first time in our history, a woman is being honored and will make her way into the Pantheon.
Making the transfer decision is a way of showing what the president wants for the country, from an intellectual and a philosophical point of view.
Hello and welcome to France in Focus. I'm Solange Mougin. We're here at the Pantheon. It is one of Paris's most beautiful buildings, but it is also a place of collective memory and a symbol of French values. Because beneath its walls and below its domes, there are the remains of some of France's most esteemed men and women. But it takes more than just excellence to be honored here. The choice, be it Alexandre Dumas, Jean Moulin, Marie Curie, or Josephine Baker, the choice is at the president's discretion. And that means it's a political one as well.
Solemn services, staged like clockwork. Almost every single president in France's Fifth Republic is taking part in a ceremony to reinter the remains of famous French citizens. Under Charles de Gaulle, the ashes of French resistance leader Jean Moulin were transferred to the Pantheon. It would be 23 years before another ceremony at the Pantheon. René Cassin, a human rights activist, Jean Monnet, a co-founder of modern-day Europe, and scientists Pierre and Marie Curie. Under François Mitterrand, there was always a political message in tow.
Today's ceremony is particularly special because for the first time in our history, a woman is being honored and will make her way into the Pantheon.
The tributes are a ritual that help build the president's image.
Making the transfer decision is a way of showing what the president wants for the country, from an intellectual and a philosophical point of view. And it's a tribute to the country's history.
Alexandre Dumas, the grandson of a former slave, was honored by Jacques Chirac. Writer Aimé Césaire by Nicolas Sarkozy. And members of the French resistance by François Hollande. Macron's decision to honor Josephine Baker is another strong symbol.
She's a black woman, she's fought for women's rights, she joined the resistance, and she felt like she belonged to several countries. So this choice is the opposite of communitarianism, and it could be seen as a nod to universalism.
This will be the third ceremony under Macron. Rights activist Simone Veil and author Maurice Genevoix have both been honored since the start of the president's 5-year term.
David Madec, bonjour, hello.
Bonjour. Hello.
Thank you for having us. You are the head administrator of the Pantheon. You know its little secrets and its history. And I'd like to start by asking you how this place came to be.
The monument was first designed to be a church. Louis XV, the King of France, fell ill during a military campaign and then made a promise to his confessor to build the church of Sainte-Geneviève. He had this church built with a very specific political aim. He chose the hill of Sainte-Geneviève, the highest place in Paris, and the Pantheon remained the highest monument in Paris until the construction of the Eiffel Tower. It's also a very symbolic place. We're at the centre of what used to be the heart of the city during antiquity, and we're just in front of the Sorbonne University, so it's royalty imposing its power right in front of the university.
And at what point did it shift from being a church to a place where we bury France's great men and women?
The evolution and transformation from church to Pantheon took place in several stages. The first step was during the Revolution, when Voltaire entered the Pantheon. The monument was then transformed to welcome the leading men of the Enlightenment. The underlying idea was that the role models of the Revolution, those who light the way for the people, must be honoured. Then the monument evolved through the 19th century. It alternated as a church and a Pantheon, depending on political changes, until the death of Victor Hugo in 1885, when it definitively became the Temple of Great Men.
Yes.
David Medek, we are below ground in the Pantheon's crypt. And I'd like to know what makes a man or a woman worthy of being buried or reburied here.
It's above all the President of the Republic who decides whether a woman or a man gets into the Pantheon. They're not only chosen for the excellence they represent, but also for their commitment to help others. We're here in front of the tomb of Marie Curie.
From what I understand, there's something special about this tomb.
Yes, Marie Curie is a unique character. She was the first woman to enter the Pantheon for her own work, in the words of François Mitterrand. She was a nurse during the First World War. She was obviously a great scientist, and she also fought to defend the place of women in universities and in science. How about this for an anecdote? Her coffin is wrapped in lead because people thought at the time she was still radioactive because of the research she conducted on radioactivity.
That makes sense.
Let's keep going.
There's a lot of pomp and circumstance that comes with this honor, the ceremonies, large crowds on the streets. How did that begin?
This type of grand ceremony began with Victor Hugo. A few days after his death in 1885, he entered the Pantheon, and this ceremony gathered between 2 and 3 million people in the streets of Paris. It was the first very large ceremony, and it's become a model for the following entries into the Pantheon.
How has the tradition of being pantheonized, of being buried here, changed over the years?
Every new entry changes the definition of the monument. Some are very symbolic, like Victor Hugo, who we mentioned. The entry of more women has made the monument more anchored in society. The entry of Simone Weil in 2018 has created a totally new phenomenon. Suddenly, the monument has been much better understood by the whole French population.
Thank you for having us, David.
My pleasure.
As one of France's highest honors, there are actually very few people who end up here. And in the past, there have been nominees that sometimes don't elicit the kind of consensus that's often needed to be pantheonized. And as we're about to see, some people, well, they're against it.
Je voudrais en premier lieu rappeler combien peu nombreuses sont les femmes qui ont eu à ce jour l'honneur de reposer dans ce monument.
Calling for Gisèle Halimi to be reburied in the Pantheon, last year supporters of the lawyer and feminist activist launched a petition, which has since attracted more than 35,000 signatures, among them Paris councillor and feminist activist Raphaël Rémy-Leleu.
The facade of the Pantheon reads, "To great men from a grateful nation." But what about great women? It's a question of redressing the balance and of equality, of rediscovering the history of our fatherland and our motherland.
But Gisèle Halimi's supporters have been left disappointed. Emmanuel Macron has decided that she will receive a national tribute at Les Invalides, but will not be reburied in the mausoleum. As an advocate for Algerian independence during the Algerian War, she was perhaps not the most palatable pick for some on the right of France's political spectrum.
It shows a lack of courage regarding some of Gisèle Halimi's political stances and their legacy, which he can't accept. Particularly some of her feminist and anti-racist positions, which on the contrary I think are fine values that deserve to be celebrated.
On other occasions, it's been the families of notable figures who've rebuffed presidents' calls to reinter their loved ones. Such was the case for Nicolas Sarkozy, who in 2009 proposed that Albert Camus' remains be moved to the Pantheon. The writer's children refused, calling it an attempt to reappropriate their father's image, and Camus' biographer agreed that the Pantheon wasn't the right place for him.
For me, both the person of Albert Camus and all of his work contradict this kind of absurd decision. Camus always refused honours and defended the values of justice and truth, and he always made fun of politicians.
Other times, the person themselves has turned down a Pantheon burial. Former Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau preferred instead to be laid to rest in his native Vendée, in western France. Charles de Gaulle also declined the offer. France's most celebrated statesman lies in Colombey-les-Deux-Églises, a small village in the northeast of the country.
That's all we have time for, but we leave you here at one of the Pantheon's treasures, Foucault's pendulum. It is proof indeed that the world goes round as it welcomes great men and women. Stay tuned for more news on France 24.